All right, guys. So we got some pretty bleak updates here on Trump's mass deportation plan that's now officially underway. So I got a lot that I want to get to here. We're just going to go ahead and jump into it here, starting off with this NBC News article on some of the basic numbers and locations of where all of this is happening. So they say that following President Donald Trump's return to office, immigration enforcement operations have started to sweep through major U.S. cities. And it seems like some of the early targets are places like Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, a few other places as well. They say that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, said that it arrested 956 people on Sunday, but an NBC News report found that they had arrested close to 1,200 that day. And keep this in mind, just 613, nearly 52%, were considered criminal arrests, meaning that the rest appear to be non-violent offenders or people who have not committed any criminal offense other than crossing the border illegally, which, as they point out here, being undocumented is considered a civil offense, not a crime. Okay? Same with overstaying your visa, for example. They say that arrest numbers swelled again the following day as the agency said that it had made around 1,179 arrests and 853 detainers were lodged on Monday. So while the Trump administration has touted that the crackdown is targeting criminals, there has been concern over law-abiding migrants and those with permits also being rounded up. So here's the issue, guys. Trump and Republicans have for a long time now been trying to sell the narrative that there's a horde of migrants who are coming in, they're gang members, they're criminals, they're going to kill you and your family, and that's just not true. It's not backed up by the data. In fact, there's plenty of data that shows that migrants who come into this country that are undocumented commit crimes at a lower rate than American citizens who are born here in this country. So there's a contradiction here between the narrative that Trump and Republicans are trying to sell versus the reality. And so they want you to think that all these people that they're rounding up right now, they're not family members, they're not mothers and sisters and brothers and children and whatever else the case may be, who are coming to this country in search of a better life for themselves and their families. They're all hardened gang members and criminals, right? Which again is not true, but that's the narrative that the Trump administration is trying to push. And I also do think that, we've gotten some recent polling, this year and over the last couple of years, showing that deportations are broadly popular amongst the American people. But I do find it hard to believe that that's going to last as we start to get more and more stories, as are already coming out right now, about families being split up, about, neighbors and communities being torn apart by this kind of a mass deportation operation. And so part of that selling pitch to keep this in their realm, to keep the narrative under control from the Trump administration, is labeling all migrants as criminals, essentially, right? So here was Trump's new press secretary on that exact thing.
Of the 3,500 arrests ICE has made so far since President Trump came back into office, can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws, and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are.
Okay, so again, you see the narrative that they're trying to push. It's just not true. I guess depending on what your definition of criminal is, like I jaywalked today, does that make me a criminal because I committed some misdemeanor offense or some low-level offense like that? Crossing the border, okay, or not having your documents, being undocumented, or overstaying a visa, these are civil crimes, right? If you want to call them crimes. They're not criminal offenses, right? They're civil offenses, I should say. So, again, you see a little bit of the contradiction there. And you also have this article from Forbes that I think makes an important point here that, again, although they were trying to make the selling pitch as though we're going to go after the gang members and the hardened criminals and whatever else the case may be, again, the reality is that a vast majority of migrants are not hardened criminals. And so essentially what they're doing here is trying to juice the numbers as much as possible and completely ignoring the, we're going after violent criminals aspect of this. So their headline here from Forbes was Trump team focuses deportations on immigration numbers, not criminals. So again, he wants to make a big show to his base. I feel like, Trump thinks that this is one of the major reasons why he won the last election was because of the border, because of immigration. So he's trying to make a big show of this. And they start off here. They say, Trump officials concede generating large numbers of deportations, not apprehending criminals, is the administration's chief immigration goal. During his presidential campaign, Donald Trump said on several occasions the primary reason his administration would deport undocumented immigrants was to prevent them from harming Americans. However, a minority of undocumented immigrants have committed serious crimes, and most people without lawful status have lived in the United States for more than 10 years and have jobs and families. By setting arrest quotas, as he has done, for federal agents, Trump officials acknowledge the administration does not intend to prioritize deporting dangerous criminals. So, again, you see a little bit of what the actual priority is there. Now, they also made a good point down here further in the article about how not only are they going around and arresting people who are undocumented or in the country illegally, if you want to call it that, but they're going out of their way to create more undocumented people, right? To remove legal status or permitted status from people who came here legally through legal avenues. Okay, so here they start off. They say, the administration has determined one way to increase deportation targets is to remove legal protections from individuals who came to the U.S. through legal channels or remained lawfully, such as through the temporary protected status. Quote, protection from deportation may expire for up to 2.7 million people within the next 2 years, according to the National Foundation for American Policy. The vast majority face dismissal prospects if forced to return to their birth countries. They say that the Trump administration is creating more undocumented immigrants by removing legal protections for those paroled in the countries in recent years. One reason may be that many of these individuals could be easy to find, which can help drive up deportation numbers. So again, they're not going after people who have been convicted for some violent offense. They're saying, we're going to change your legal status to an illegal status so that we can make it easy to find you because, we know exactly who these people are, just so we can juice the numbers. Now, they finish off here. They say, the New York Times reported on a DHS memo giving ICE agents the ability to expel migrants in 2 major Biden-era programs that have allowed more than 1 million people to enter the country temporarily. This includes migrants who entered lawfully after scheduling appointments via the CBP One app, and more than 500,000 Cubans, Haitians, Venezuelans, and Nicaraguans who arrived in the U.S. with sponsors under the humanitarian parole programs. An analysis showed that the programs reduced illegal entry from the 4 countries by 98% over 2 years. Okay, so 2 important points on that. These programs reduced illegal entry into the country by 98% from these specific countries. So in other words, there were programs in place, like them or not, that made it easier to understand who's coming into the country, where are they, how are we going to process this moving forward. So at least compared to the relative alternative, that was preferable, right? Even if you're somebody who is anti-immigration in some sense, right? You would rather have people coming in here through these legal avenues so that we can create a process that actually makes sense rather than having them come over illegally, right? So Trump is now trying to destroy those programs, make them illegal, and then deport them out of the country. And then at the same time, another important thing here is, what do these 4 countries have in common? Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela. These are all countries that the United States, both throughout history, over the last 70 some odd years or so, or especially for Haiti going back much farther than that, and up until this day, the United States has been actively meddling with or outright sabotaging, right? Several of these countries we have sanctions on, like Venezuela and Cuba, especially Cuba. How many decades have we had an embargo on Cuba? So as we're actively trying to worsen the lives of people in this country, not to mention in Haiti where we participated in a coup, we're actively trying to worsen the lives of the populations in some of these countries because the U.S. doesn't like their leadership. So we want to put pressure on the population there in order to topple those governments and replace them with U.S. corporate-friendly alternatives. And so we are driving people out of those countries because of how we have worsened the conditions for them. So maybe something to think about as a part of this immigration conversation, right? Because there is an underlying aspect of this where a lot of people who come to the United States, it's not like they didn't want to be in their home country because they hated their home country and they just love America. A lot of it is they're fleeing violence, or they're fleeing, terrible conditions or a lack of opportunity. And a lot of that we are responsible for. So again, just something to keep in mind as a part of this conversation. Now we move on to this short but equally disturbing clip here of Trump sitting down with Sean Hannity in the Oval Office, where he says this.
Open borders with people pouring in, some of whom, I won't get into it, but you can look at them and you can say, could be trouble, could be trouble.
You can look at them and say they could be trouble. What do you mean by that? Specify what exactly you mean by that, right? I don't really know how you could possibly interpret this in a good faith way and not come to the conclusion that it's just racist. He's just saying, I can look at certain people and there's this model that I have in my head of who a troublemaker might be. And so I immediately associate that person with being a criminal, right? That's what he's saying. I mean, it's pretty clear. Now, somehow an even worse clip than that one is here we have Trump's border czar, this demon, Tom Homan, who went on CNN with Caitlin Collins. And you guys tell me how you interpret what he's saying here, but it seems to me like he is openly coming out against migrants understanding what their rights are under U.S. law. Let's go ahead and watch this clip.
Sanctuary cities are making it very difficult to arrest the criminals. For instance, Chicago, very well educated. They've been educated how to defy ICE, how to hide from ICE. And I've seen many pamphlets from many NGOs. Here's how you escape ICE from arresting you. Here's what you need to do. They call it know your rights. I call it how to escape arrest. There's a warrant for your arrest, and they tell you how to hide from ICE. No, don't open your door. Don't answer questions. Okay, you can call it know your rights all you want.
So, okay, notice the examples that he gave in that clip, right? Because he's not talking about migrants being told how to run away from the cops. He gave two examples there of you don't have to open your door and you don't have to speak to the police, right? Or to ICE or whatever the case may be. He's just describing fundamental rights that we're supposed to have in this country. This is why if you ever get arrested, you're read your Miranda rights, okay? You have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. You have a right to an attorney. If you can't afford one will be provided to you. These are just fundamental rights that we have in this country. Okay, so you don't implicate yourself in something. So, and by the way, if, broadly, whether or not you are a migrant in this country or not, never speak to the police, never speak to ICE unless you have a lawyer present. You don't have to. And there's never a good reason to. It will never result in anything positive. So that's my advice for you guys as well. But again, Trump administration borders are here angry that people are helping to educate migrants on what their legal rights are in terms of interacting with the police or with ICE or with any other form of law enforcement. So again, to give you a perspective in terms of where we're at right now. Now, we also had this aspect of it, which is kind of funny on the one hand, because as the U.S. is simultaneously terrified of the rise of China, terrified that China may, end up having a better relationship with certain countries than the U.S., at the same time, we are also actively going out of our way to piss off some of our allies. So as a part of this deportation plan here, we've had Trump deporting migrants on flights, some of which he's using military planes where they have people in handcuffs and shackles on their feet. And, there are other allegations as well. But he's using military planes. He's treating people inhumanely and is shipping them off to various countries on these planes and pissing off various countries, most of which are actually U.S. allies. So I have a couple examples of that here. And he's alienating countries in the Western Hemisphere right now, and potentially in the long run, driving them closer and closer to being, in a positive relationship with China. So this is all deeply ironic, even just from a so-called America first or an American imperialist perspective. This is not what you would want to do. You would want to have positive, good relationships with some of these countries. But here we had a Honduran president saying that In the case of unnecessary reprisals against our migrants, we would have to reconsider a change in our military cooperation policies with the USA. For decades, they've maintained military bases on our soil without paying a cent. So here we have a situation where it's a country where the US has military bases, apparently that they're operating for free, they're not even paying for them. And we have the president of Honduras saying, we might need to rethink that, given how you're treating the migrants that you're sending back to Honduras. Fantastic work. Fantastic work. Now, as Ryan Grimm points out here, these Latin American countries have accepted deportation flights for years. All you have to do is not use a military plane and treat them with basic dignity. Trump is choosing not to do that. Now, we also had another similar thing here from Brazil. Again, a U.S. ally here. It's pointed out by Dropsite. The Brazilian government has also complained of the inhumane treatment of dozens of migrants deported to the United States, or from the United States to the city of Manaus. They say in a statement issued on Sunday, Brazil's Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that it would file a formal request for clarification with the U.S. government over the degrading treatment of deportees, including 6 children. They say that they claim that the use of handcuffs and leg irons violates the terms of the agreement with the U.S., which requires the dignified, respectful, and humane treatment of deportees. So that deportees told Brazilian media upon their arrival that they were assaulted and threatened by U.S. agents during the flight. And you can get a little bit of the images here of them arriving back in Brazil. So listen, guys, again, a lot of this is incredibly dark. I mean, none of it should be a surprise because this is exactly what Trump said he was going to do on the campaign trail. He estimated that he would want as many as 20 million people thrown out of the country. So, this is, starting to come to fruition. This is exactly what he ran on, and he's starting the process, and it's just as dark as we could possibly imagine. So listen, guys, there's no doubt that our immigration system is broken. It's largely dysfunctional. It's inhumane in many ways. And there are a lot of different issues with exploitation of people who do come into this country who are undocumented. But the solution to that, in my opinion at least, is to fix the system itself, to create legal avenues for people to come into this country, to work temporarily if that's what they want to do, and then be able to go back to their home countries, or to stay here to become a U.S. citizen, to become a U.S. resident. You have to open up avenues for people to come into the country legally, or else you are constantly going to be dealing with the problem of undocumented migrants coming into the country. Trump is delusional in thinking that if we just crack down hard enough, if we just instill the fear of God in people and do these violent mass deportations and family separation and whatever else the case may be, if we just do enough of that, then I guess immigration will magically stop, even though we're doing absolutely nothing to address the underlying conditions as to why people are coming to the southern border in the first place. So that's the trajectory that Trump has chosen. Is it going to work? No. Is he potentially going to try to get us into a war with the cartels in Mexico as he promised to do? And, one of the first things he did when he came into office was declare Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations, sort of as a justification for something like that. He might do that. So it's all incredibly bleak. We'll have to stay on top of it. We're going to get more and more stories that are coming out about families, communities being ripped apart. And, hopefully at some point the pressure mounts to such an extent that this kind of stuff can't continue. And also at the same time, people should be trying to educate themselves and everybody that they know about what their rights are. Contrary to what Border Czar Tom Homan was saying in that clip that we watched, you should know your rights.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying